Imagine being the supreme architect of reality. Like, you are the one who meticulously draws up the blueprints for literally all of existence.
Right.
You determine the shape of the galaxies, the physical laws of the universe, all of it. And then after all that monumental effort, you basically end up as the forgotten third wheel of your own divine trinity.
Yeah, it's quite a demotion.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are basing our exploration on a really comprehensive Wikipedia article about Brahma, the Hindu god of creation. And our mission today is to, well, piece together the history of this deity who engineered the cosmos, only to be kind of written out of his own religion.
Exactly.
We're going to decode the staggering math of his lifespan, which is just, it's mind-bending, and figure out where all his worshippers actually went.
Yeah, we are dissecting the historical and theological evolution of Brahma. But, the challenge when approaching this mythology is that the sheer scale of the text can be completely overwhelming.
Oh, for sure.
And it often trips people up right at the starting line with this major linguistic hurdle. You will constantly encounter two terms that look nearly identical.
Right. I saw this in the source material. It's really confusing at first glance.
It is. So there is Brahman ending in an N and Brahma ending in an A. And they represent two entirely different ways of understanding the universe.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener. What is the difference?
So Brahman with an N is an abstract, neuter, completely genderless concept in Hindu philosophy. It is the infinite, impersonal, universal principle that underlies every single thing in existence.
Got it. It's the concept, not a person.
Exactly. Brahma, conversely with an A, is the masculine personified creator god. He takes a visible form and performs a very specific cosmic job.
Okay, let's ground this in a modern framework so you can really visualize it. Think of Brahman, the concept, as the invisible raw code and electrical infrastructure that makes the entire internet possible.
I like that.
Yeah, like it doesn't have a shape, it doesn't have a personality, but nothing exists without it. Brahma, the god, is like a highly specific, very visible software program built on top of that infrastructure.
Right.
He's specifically designed to engineer the physical hardware. And if we carry that forward to the rest of the Hindu trinity, the Trimurti Vishnu, the preserver, is the ongoing operating system and cybersecurity keeping the network stable.
Yeah, making sure it doesn't crash.
Right. And Shiva, the destroyer, is the inevitable hard drive wipe and system reboot.
That is actually a brilliant way to look at it. And the ancient texts actually support that sort of technological hierarchy.
Yeah.
I mean, Brahma is frequently described as a secondary creator.
Wait, secondary? He's the creator god, though.
He is, but he doesn't conjure the primordial universe out of absolute nothingness. The underlying raw material, that Brahman infrastructure you mentioned, it already exists.
Oh, I see.
Brahma's specific function is just to organize it. He creates the forms within the universe. And depending on which Purana you read, his origin really reflects this secondary status.
Right. The origin stories in the texts are pretty wild.
They are. Sometimes he emerges within this massive, radiant cosmic egg called the Hiranyagarbha, just floating in an eternal void.
A golden cosmic egg.
Yeah. But in the Vishnu-focused texts, the imagery is even more specific. There's this endless cosmic ocean where the god Vishnu sleeps.
Okay.
And from Vishnu's navel, a single lotus flower sprouts and blooms. And seated inside that blossom is Brahma, ready to begin the work of organizing reality.
Just picture the sheer surrealism of that scene for a second. A sleeping deity dreaming the architect of the universe into existence through a flower sprouting from his belly button.
It's incredible imagery.
It really is. And the visual representation of Brahma is just as deliberate. Like, he is traditionally depicted as a man with a red or golden complexion.
Right.
And he's sporting this long white beard that signals an incomprehensible depth of sage-like experience. Plus, he uses a swan or a goose called a hamsa as his animal mount.
Which is very unique among the gods.
Totally. But the detail that instantly grabs your attention when you look at statues or paintings of him is that he has 4 heads, just gazing simultaneously in the 4 cardinal directions.
Yeah, and those 4 heads are the ultimate symbol of his intellectual authority. The texts credit his 4 mouths with speaking the 4 Vedas into existence.
The Vedas being the most foundational texts, right?
Yeah, exactly. They are the foundational sacred scriptures of Hinduism, encompassing hymns, philosophy, and guidance for rituals. So by generating these texts, Brahma isn't just building rocks and stars.
He's building the rules.
Right. He is weaving the fundamental knowledge and cosmic law into the actual fabric of the universe.
But notice what he is not holding. I found this super interesting in the article. He has 4 arms, but he carries absolutely no weapons.
That's a crucial detail.
Right, because look at the rest of the pantheon. Shiva wields this devastating trident. Vishnu holds a razor-sharp discus. But Brahma, he carries a rosary, a mala, to track cosmic time. He holds a water pot, the kamandalu, containing the primordial waters of creation. He clutches a manuscript of the Vedas, and he holds these ladles used for pouring ghee into a sacrificial fire known as a shruka.
Right, the tools of a ritualist.
Exactly. He is equipped like a scholar and an engineer. So why is the entity who builds reality entirely unarmed? Does he just float above the physical conflicts of the world, completely detached from the chaos?
Well, to understand his lack of weaponry, we really have to look at the mechanics of how creation actually happens in this philosophy.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the Maitreya Upanishad breaks down existence into 3 fundamental qualities, or gunas. Brahma is the embodiment of rajas.
Rajas, okay.
Yeah. Rajas is unrelenting passion, dynamic activity, and driving momentum. It is the raw urge to expand and create without any moral filter.
Without any moral filter.
Right. He creates simply because that is his nature, churning out the material and the spiritual, the beautiful and the terrifying, all in one massive burst of productivity. A weapon implies defense or targeted destruction. Brahma is purely an engine of outward expansion.
Okay, but pure, unfiltered expansion sounds incredibly dangerous. If you just leave an engine running with the throttle wide open, it's going to tear itself apart.
Which is precisely why he does not operate alone. To act as a governor on that runaway engine, his consort is the goddess Sarasvati.
Ah.
She embodies the opposing quality of sattva, which represents purity, harmony, balance, and illumination.
So they balance each other out.
Exactly. The interaction between these 2 forces is what makes the universe functional. Brahma provides the explosive driving momentum of rajas, and Sarasvati provides the clarifying structural harmony of sattva.
Wow.
Together, they process raw chaos into a structured reality. And because he is the ultimate intellect, the texts state that he doesn't reproduce biologically to populate this reality.
Right, he creates children purely through intense concentration.
Yes. These offspring are the Manasaputra, the mind-born sons.
Which brings up a huge question for me. If he is purely a mind generating the physical rules of the universe through sheer thought, does he sit outside those rules? Like, does the architect outlive the building?
He does not.
Really?
Yeah. In the theistic cosmology, Brahma is completely bound by time. When his designated lifespan reaches its end, he is not spared. He dissolves back into the formless, abstract Brahman.
The underlying code.
Exactly. The entire universe collapses with him, lies dormant, and eventually a new cosmic cycle restarts. A new lotus blooms, and a new Brahma is born.
Okay, here is where the scale of this timeline just snaps human comprehension in half.
Oh, absolutely.
In Hindu cosmology, time is not a straight line from past to future. It is a spinning wheel divided into immense ages called yugas.
Right.
A complete cycle of 4 yugas includes the age we are allegedly living in right now, the Kali Yuga. And one single day of Brahma, just his daylight waking hours, is comprised of 1,000 of these 4 yuga cycles.
It's just massive. And his night is just as long.
And he lives for 100 of these years.
The translation of those cycles into human years is what really shatters our usual understanding of history.
Yeah, let's do the math on that for you listening. 100 years of Brahma's life equals 311 trillion, 40 billion Earth years.
Yeah.
311.04 trillion. Just pause and look around you for a second. Every historical event you've ever read about, the construction of the pyramids, the extinction of the dinosaurs, the birth of the Earth itself, the future death of our sun.
All of it.
In this cosmology, all of that combined is barely a microscopic fraction of a Tuesday morning for Brahma.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Totally. And to pinpoint exactly where you are sitting right now, according to the ancient texts, we are currently in the 28th Kali Yuga of the 51st year of the current Brahma's life.
Which is fascinating because it completely reframes the human obsession with permanence. Well, we tend to view the creation of the universe as a definitive, one-time historical event that happened in the deep past. But this mathematical framework insists that creation is merely a seasonal occurrence.
Like leaves falling off a tree and growing back.
Exactly. Reality blooms and dies on a schedule over and over again, in a cycle so vast that human existence is essentially a subatomic flash. Brahma is the engineer of the present cycle, but his mortality proves that even the act of creation is temporary.
And that terrifying temporariness brings us to the core mystery of this deep dive.
Right, the fall from grace.
Yeah. Between the 2nd and 6th century CE, Brahma was at the absolute peak of his influence. He had a massive following, major temples, active, widespread worship.
As a primary figure.
But cross over into the 7th century, and his followers seemingly vanish. He gets radically demoted, overshadowed entirely by Shiva, Vishnu, and the goddess traditions. How does the creator of the universe just get demoted?
Well, the Puranas attempt to explain this dramatic collapse through mythology. These ancient encyclopedic texts offer two primary legends to justify why the creator of the universe was essentially exiled from daily worship.
Okay, let's hear the first one.
The first is a legendary tale of deceit from the Shiva Purana. So Brahma and Vishnu are locked in a bitter argument over who is the supreme deity.
Just classic divine bickering.
Exactly. And in the midst of their bickering, the fabric of the universe is suddenly torn open by a massive, blazing pillar of fire.
Whoa!
This is Shiva, manifesting as an infinite column called the Lingotpava.
Right, and this pillar stretches infinitely up and infinitely down. So Brahma and Vishnu decide to settle their argument with a contest. Whoever finds the end of this fire is the true supreme god.
A race to the finish line.
Yeah. So Vishnu turns into a massive boar, Varaha, and violently digs down into the earth for ages. He eventually exhausts himself, realizes the pillar basically has no bottom, and returns to honestly admit his limitations.
A very noble defeat. But Brahma chooses the opposite direction. He takes the form of his mount, the swan, and flies upward for millennia, searching for the top.
Right.
He too becomes exhausted and realizes the fire is infinite. But instead of returning with the truth, he spots a Ketaki flower drifting down from the heights.
A flower.
Yes. He intercepts the flower and convinces it to lie on his behalf. Brahma returns to Vishnu and claims he reached the absolute summit, presenting the Ketaki flower as his false witness.
That is just so mold.
It is. But Shiva, possessing absolute cosmic awareness, immediately sees through the lie. And in a rage at this deceit, Shiva manifests from the fire, cuts off Brahma's 5th head, and curses him.
His 5th head?
Yeah, he originally had 5 in this telling. And the curse dictates that Brahma will never be widely worshipped and will have no dedicated festivals, effectively ending his active cult.
Okay, wait. I'm stuck on something here.
What's that?
If Brahma is the entity whose 4 mouths literally spoke the sacred Vedas into existence, the foundational knowledge of the universe, how is Shiva able to just appear, chop off his head, and curse him out of relevance? Doesn't the creator have ultimate jurisdiction over the things he created?
That is an excellent question. And that logical gap points directly to the real-world mechanics behind the story.
What do you mean?
In the physical world, gods don't demote each other. Their followers do.
Oh, wow. Okay.
During this period in Indian history, powerful religious sects were competing for followers, royal patronage, and cultural dominance. The Shiva Purana was written and compiled by Shaivites, the devotees of Shiva.
So they had an agenda.
Exactly. They deliberately engineered this story to solve a theological problem. They needed to explain why their god was supreme.
Right.
And the most effective way to do that was to take the established creator god, expose him as deeply flawed, arrogant, and dishonest, and have their chosen deity mete out the punishment. It is a brilliant piece of ancient theological maneuvering.
So it's basically an aggressive PR campaign waged through sacred storytelling.
Precisely.
And the Vaishnavites, the followers of Vishnu, had their own completely different spin to write Brahma out of the picture. According to the article, the Vishnu Purana uses what I call the retirement narrative.
The retirement narrative. Yes, the Vaishnavite approach is remarkably bureaucratic.
It really is.
They argue that Brahma's singular cosmic function was to initiate the creation of the physical forms. Once the galaxies were spinning, the planets were formed, and life was seeded, his contract was essentially fulfilled.
Like a contractor handing over the keys.
Exactly. The universe is now in its operational phase. Vishnu is actively preserving the intricate balance of reality every single second. Shiva is actively breaking down the old to make way for the new.
Right, those are ongoing jobs.
Yeah, ongoing daily operations. Brahma has no ongoing role. He is a retired architect living in a house he already finished building.
I mean, I understand the functional logic, but it still feels incredibly ruthless.
So,
He drafts the blueprints for all of reality, and instead of enduring reverence, he basically gets laid off because his project moved out of the development phase and into maintenance.
it is harsh. But look at how successfully that logic permeated the culture. To actually execute this demotion, you need societal mechanisms.
Like what?
Well, When a local king or wealthy merchant wanted to secure divine favor, the priests advising them, who were increasingly aligning with Shiva or Vishnu, would suggest that building a towering temple to the active preserver or the powerful destroyer was a better investment.
Ah, follow the money.
Exactly. Why honor the retired creator when you need help right now? So funds were redirected. The wandering bards and storytellers who traveled from village to village began singing the new epics where Brahma was either a cheat or an afterthought.
Wow.
Over a few centuries, the physical infrastructure of his worship was completely starved of resources.
And you can see the results of that starvation today. If you go to India, finding a temple dedicated primarily to Brahma is a genuine rarity.
Very rare.
The most famous one left standing is the Brahma Temple in Pushkar, located in the state of Rajasthan. And even that solitary temple is burdened with mythology to explain its isolation.
Right, another curse.
Yeah, local legend claims it is the only place he can be worshipped due to a totally separate curse, this time from his own wife, Savitri, after he performed a major fire sacrifice with another consort. It's like everywhere you look in his homeland, the narratives are designed to sideline him.
However, theology is rarely confined by geography.
True.
A fascinating phenomenon occurs when an idea is suppressed in its place of origin. It often migrates. As Indian merchants, scholars, and priests traveled along the ancient maritime trade routes, they carried the concept of the creator god with them.
Right?
So while the Shaivite and Vaishnavite sects dominated the Indian subcontinent, Brahma found incredibly fertile ground across Southeast Asia.
This is where the story pivots from a quiet retirement to an absolute explosion of reverence.
It really does.
Like if you walk into the bustling, ultra-modern heart of Bangkok, Thailand, just amidst the shopping malls and insane traffic, you will find the Erawan Shrine.
Yes.
It is anchored by a breathtaking golden statue of the four-faced Brahma, who is known in the region as Phra Phrom. And it is not an abandoned relic, it is pulsing with life.
It's constantly busy.
Traditional Thai dancers perform constantly, the air is just thick with incense, and crowds of people from all over the world gather to pray to him for good fortune and success. The Thai government even features his golden statue atop their government house.
It's amazing. And the migration of his influence goes even further south into Indonesia, where his legacy is literally carved into the geology of the island.
Wait, carved into the geology?
Yeah. In East Java, there is an active volcano called Mount Bromo.
Oh.
And the name Bromo is the Javanese pronunciation of Brahma. Historically, a local sect believed that the physical crater of this volcano was a direct geographical connection to Brahmaloka, the highest cosmic realm where Brahma resides.
That is wild, and that connection is still honored with intense devotion today. Every year, during the Yajna festival, local Javanese Hindus make a massive pilgrimage.
Right up the volcano.
Yeah, they climb the slopes of this active volcano, stand on the precarious rim of the crater, and throw offerings directly into the smoking caldera.
Wow.
They hurl vegetables, fruit, livestock, and money into the depths as a visceral, physical demonstration of gratitude to the ultimate creator. It is just such a stunning contrast to the quiet, marginalized temples in India.
It really serves as a powerful demonstration of how spiritual concepts adapt to survive. The idea of Brahma evolved from the very early abstract Vedic creator figures.
Right.
He lost a massive theological turf war in his native land, stripped of his temples by rival sects. Yet the fundamental human need to honor the origin of things is so strong that he was seamlessly integrated into Buddhist cosmology and local folk traditions thousands of miles away.
It proves that a sufficiently powerful idea can never be completely legislated out of existence. It simply finds a new landscape to inhabit.
Yeah. Exactly. From the ultimate cosmic architect dreaming the universe into existence, to the victim of a calculated mythological smear campaign, to an active, revered presence in the volcanic craters of Java and the busy streets of Bangkok.
It's an unbelievable trajectory.
It is. And, exploring that trajectory leaves us with a really provocative parallel to our modern world.
What's that?
Well, consider what we are doing right now with the frantic pursuit of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
We are desperately trying to build systems that can generate art, structure data, and essentially organize a new digital reality. We are trying to be the architects.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
But if we succeed in creating a self-sustaining system, our role fundamentally ends the moment it is turned on. Are we prepared to face the reality of Brahma? The reality that the ultimate reward for successfully creating a universe is your own immediate obsolescence.
That is a lot to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep examining the origins of the ideas that shape our reality, and we'll catch you next time.
Usually when we think about fear, we treat it like a ghost story.
Right, like a shiver in the dark or something spooky.
Exactly. Just this abstract, spooky feeling. But what if fear is actually this highly calculated biological hack?
A literal biological mechanism.
Yeah. An invisible airborne signal that can completely rewrite your brain software in just milliseconds. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our mission is tearing into the sheer mechanics of fear.
And that means looking at how it hijacks your body, how it spreads through a room, and how you can actually hack it back.
Because in an era of, constant anxiety, understanding that underlying machinery is basically the ultimate tool for critical thinking.
I mean, once you see the levers being pulled inside your own nervous system, you stop being just a passive victim to the feeling.
You realize it isn't a weakness.
Exactly. It is an ancient, neutral mechanism designed purely to keep you alive.
So, okay, let's unpack this. To understand how fear influences society, we really have to start with the hardware.
Right.
We all know the classic fight or flight response.
And freeze, of course.
Right. Fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah.
But the actual physiological details are wild. Take goosebumps.
Ah, yes. Piloerection.
Yeah. I always thought goosebumps were just like a reaction to a cold breeze.
Well, clinically, it is a brilliant evolutionary tactic. When your brain perceives a threat, it sends a signal that causes tiny muscles attached to your hair follicles to contract.
Which is crazy to think about.
It really is. If you are a furry mammal, this traps a layer of air to insulate you. But more importantly, in a threat scenario, making all your hair stand on end makes you look physically larger.
So you literally puff up on command.
Exactly. It is an instant, automatic mechanism to appear more intimidating to whatever is trying to eat you.
Wow. And then there's the classic feeling of butterflies in your stomach.
Dyspepsia.
Right. It turns out that's not just nervous energy vibrating in your gut. The moment you get scared, your body makes a snap judgment about resource management.
It forcefully diverts blood flow away from your digestive system.
Because digesting your lunch is a luxury you just can't afford if you're running for your life.
Yeah, that blood rushes straight to your skeletal muscles so you can sprint or fight. Your stomach is effectively shutting down to save you.
It is extreme biological triage.
It really is. But what's truly intriguing is looking at the specific things that trigger this extreme response in the first place. Biologists study this concept called preparedness.
Oh, this part of the research was fascinating.
Yeah, it is the theory that our most common phobias actually evolved during entirely different geological eras.
So it's basically an evolutionary timeline mapped directly onto our brains.
Spot on. For instance, acrophobia.
The fear of heights.
Right. The theory suggests that one is so ancient it developed back in the Mesozoic era. It is common to pretty much all mammals.
But then you have the fear of snakes, which developed millions of years later in the Cenozoic era.
Which is common to all simians, yeah.
But then the fear of mice or insects, that's relatively new hardware.
Very new. That fear developed in the Paleolithic and Neolithic periods.
When humans started settling down and storing food.
Yeah, exactly. Suddenly, these tiny pests became dangerous carriers of disease, so we had to learn to fear them.
So to put that in perspective for you listening, this evolutionary preparedness is almost like having pre-installed apps on a brand new smartphone.
That is a great way to look at it.
We are born preloaded with the fear of snakes app because it helped our ancestors survive. But the fear of cars app, that has to be downloaded manually through personal experience.
Because cars simply haven't been around long enough to make it into our DNA. That analogy works perfectly because it highlights evolutionary flexibility.
Right.
Instead of handing us a rigid emotion called fear, evolution gave us a highly adaptable system. We can radically change our bodily states to address whatever new threats pop up.
We just happen to use the word fear as a catch-all label for that shifting bodily state.
Exactly. Though I should mention, there is a robust debate in modern science about whether fear is a distinct evolutionary product for animals at all.
Because of anthropomorphism.
Yes. Some researchers argue that attributing complex human emotions to a mouse or an insect is just us projecting. What you experience as paralyzing fear might just be a rat's basic withdrawal reflex.
Their fear might just be their version of backing away from something hot.
Precisely.
Well, since we have this flexibility to download new fears, our brains are incredibly fast at wiring visual cues to threats. I mean, look at the little Albert experiment from 1920.
Yeah, John B. Watson's study. Ethically controversial, to say the least.
Hugely controversial. They took an 11-month-old baby and literally conditioned him to fear a white rat.
By striking a steel bar with a hammer every single time he touched it.
Right. The loud noise triggered his unconditioned startle response. And by repeatedly pairing that noise with the rat itself became the trigger.
But the critical finding there was how the fear generalized. Little Albert didn't just fear that one specific white rat.
His brain broadened the threat parameter. He started showing severe distress toward a rabbit, a dog, and even a Santa Claus mask with a cotton beard.
The brain takes one bad experience and immediately puts a warning label on anything that even remotely resembles it.
It is so efficient, it's almost scary. And you don't even have to experience the trauma yourself.
No, you don't. Andres Olson's research on observational learning proves that.
Yeah, his study showed that a person's amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, lights up just by watching someone else experience an aversive event.
You can literally learn to be terrified of something just by seeing another person get hurt by it.
The amygdala functions like this highly sensitive radar dish, constantly scanning the social environment.
And to understand just how vital that radar is, we have to look at patient SM.
Oh man, her story is wild.
She suffered from a rare genetic disorder called Urbach-Wiethe disease. It caused calcium deposits to build up in her brain.
Which completely destroyed both of her amygdalae by late childhood.
Exactly. And the result was that she became literally incapable of experiencing fear.
Which on paper sounds like a superpower. No anxiety, no dread, no imposter syndrome.
But in reality, it is incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, a total lack of fear repeatedly led her into highly dangerous situations.
Because the internal alarm system that tells you, hey, don't walk down that dark alley, was entirely offline.
The alarm system is non-negotiable for survival, which is exactly why nature found ways to weaponize it.
Biological hijacking.
This might be the most bizarre mechanism we cover today. The toxoplasmosis parasite.
Toxoplasma gondii. It is a single-celled parasite that can only reproduce inside the intestinal tract of a cat.
But it often finds itself inside a rat.
Right, so it has to figure out a way to get the rat eaten by the cat.
And it doesn't just make the rat physically sick, it actually rewires the rat's brain.
It is astonishing. The infected rat suddenly loses its fear of cats and becomes actively drawn to the smell of cat urine.
It literally seeks the predator out.
Yeah.
It serves itself up on a silver platter.
Because the parasite manages to cross the blood-brain barrier, it forms cysts specifically in the regions of the rat's amygdala that process predator aversion.
But it doesn't just shut the region down, right?
Right. No, it actively alters the production of dopamine. It transforms the neural pathways of fear into pathways of sexual attraction.
That is highly targeted surgical sabotage. It's like a computer hacker intentionally disabling a building security alarm and then reprogramming the front doors to swing wide open so the burglar can just stroll in.
That is a perfect analogy. The rat still has the hardware, but the software is corrupted by a third party.
But wait, that brings up a huge question for humans. When we have a fear that is ruining our lives, like a severe phobia, how do we fix our own software?
Well, exposure therapy is highly effective. It helps up to 90% of people with specific phobias.
But when you do exposure therapy, are you actually going in and deleting the corrupted fear file from your brain?
Not at all. The brain doesn't easily surrender a survival mechanism. You aren't deleting anything.
Okay, so what is happening?
Cognitive behavioral therapy works through a process called fear extinction. You are building new, stronger neural pathways alongside the old ones.
Oh, I see.
By repeatedly confronting the fear in a safe manner, your brain learns a new association, safety. And that eventually overrides the old association of danger.
So you are safely suppressing the fear-triggering stimuli by proving to the amygdala that the threat isn't real.
Exactly.
The original file is still there. You've just put a massive administrative lock on it that says, actually, this is fine.
Yes. And if we can unlearn a fear by building new pathways, that implies our brains are constantly taking in new data from our environment.
And we're taking in data we aren't even consciously aware of.
Absolutely.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the last time you walked into a room and just felt a bad vibe. You know that feeling?
Like you're suddenly on edge for no reason.
Right.
Mhm.
Could you literally have been smelling the lingering anxiety sweat of the people who were in the room before you?
It sounds like science fiction, but biological evidence points heavily to alarm pheromones.
Which they originally found in ants and earthworms back in 1968.
Yeah. When threatened, they emit chemicals that cause the rest of the colony to instantly freeze or scatter,
But decades later, researchers realized mammals do this too.
including humans.
The 2006 German sweat study.
Yes, a fascinating experiment. Researchers pooled sweat from people who had been vigorously exercising on a stationary bike.
And compared it to sweat from people who were highly anxious while waiting for a difficult academic exam.
They had study participants smell the different samples while monitoring their acoustic startle reflex.
That's the micro muscle movements around the eye, right?
Yeah.
Like how hard you blink in response to a sudden sound.
Exactly. It is a highly reliable indicator of defensive arousal.
And what happened?
When participants smelled the anxiety sweat, their startle reflex was significantly magnified. They became far more jumpy.
But the crucial detail here is the timing. This heightened defense happened prior to conscious attention.
Yes, they were sensing fear chemosignals before their logical brains even registered a scent in the room. We are chemical receivers.
We basically have a Wi-Fi antenna for dread that is always turned on.
It bypasses our logical brain completely because it operates in ancient structures like the brainstem and amygdala.
But if we're constantly absorbing ambient panic, you'd think we'd be paralyzed anytime we walked into a crowded space.
Well, biology gave us a firewall against this invisible contagion.
Social buffering.
Precisely. Just being in the presence of a calm, friendly peer dampens your chemical panic. Biologists call this calm peer an affiliative conspecific.
The presence of someone you trust activates the release of oxytocin. Right?
Yes, which directly inhibits the fear responses in the amygdala.
So holding someone's hand when you're terrified isn't just an emotional metaphor. It's a tangible neurological intervention against airborne panic.
Even honeybees do this. They show reduced aggression and fear in a disturbed colony if social buffering occurs. The mere presence of calm bees alters actual gene expression patterns related to stress.
That is mind-blowing. But that biological shield, relying on the group for safety, is exactly what makes fear such a massive lever when we zoom out to society as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. Politicians, marketers, and leaders have historically tapped into this primal emotion to shape culture.
Because when you trigger those ancient neurocircuits, you effectively bypass the cortex.
And the cortex is where logical, rational thought occurs.
Right, people in a state of fear stop evaluating facts and start seeking immediate safety. They look to the group or to a strong leader for social buffering.
By leveraging fear of the unknown, you can influence decision-making on a massive scale.
One researcher phrased it perfectly. Under the influence of fear, words become more real than reality.
It is a powerful mass persuasion tool.
And to be completely clear, we're not pointing fingers at any specific political ideology here.
No, this is an impartial look at the mechanics. Fear is a universal lever used across the entire political spectrum.
But if you keep pulling back the layers, what is the ultimate threat everyone is trying to avoid?
Psychologists point to the fear of death.
Terror management theory.
Yes. The theory proposes that our entire cultural worldview is essentially a coping mechanism.
Because humans possess a unique cognitive burden. We are biologically driven to survive, but we also know our death is inevitable.
Which creates a deep underlying psychological terror.
So we manage that terror by building cultural frameworks, religions, national identities, legacy projects.
They give us a sense of meaning and permanence that outlasts our physical bodies.
And when people are reminded of their own mortality, they experience a crisis. The research shows they double down on their worldview.
They become more defensive of their in-group and hostile toward outsiders.
Because an attack on their culture feels like an attack on their psychological armor against death.
But it is worth noting, not everyone agrees that fearing death is a rational baseline.
Right, the philosopher Shelley Kagan from Yale.
He argues that fearing death is actually a logical failure. He outlines 3 strict conditions for a fear to be rational.
Okay, what are they?
First, the object of fear has to be genuinely bad. Second, there has to be a non-negligible chance of it actually happening.
And third,
there has to be uncertainty about it happening. Because death is a 100% certainty for every living organism, it fails that third criterion.
Therefore, fearing it doesn't make logical sense.
According to Kagan, yes.
Okay, but wait, let me push back on Shelley Kagan's philosophy here.
Go for it.
I get that death is certain, which technically breaks his rule. But human biology doesn't care about a philosopher's logic.
He cares about survival.
Exactly. The fact that we will die is certain, but the when and the how are completely unknown. Isn't that ambiguity what we're actually terrified of?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact nuance Kagan himself concedes. The unpredictability of the timing is the only rationally valid cause for fear.
Because humans are fundamentally wired to despise ambiguity.
When our brain cannot predict an outcome, it treats that unknown space as a potential threat.
And when we can't logic our way out of that ultimate ambiguity, we try to put it in a box.
We categorize it.
Right. We build mythologies, folklore, and even modern horror fiction to organize our dread.
Which brings up that fictional horror podcast, The Magnus Archives.
Yes, it illustrates this beautifully. In their lore, fears aren't categorized by biology like spiders or heights.
They are categorized by thematic archetypes created by a fictional architect named Robert Smirk.
Which is such a brilliant reflection of how human cognition operates. We look for thematic patterns to make sense of chaos.
Like grouping the fear of disease and the fear of an abusive relationship into the same entity.
Because fundamentally, both stem from a deeper fear of corruption to the self.
We fear the anticipation of a negative outcome.
Whether it's disease, a bad relationship, or just failing in front of others.
Which bridges perfectly into performance anxiety. The yips.
Oh man, the yips. You know that feeling when you're standing at an ATM and suddenly a PN you've typed 1,000 times just vanishes from your mind?
Or you're typing a common word and your fingers completely forget the sequence.
Imagine that feeling. But it's happening to your entire professional career on live television.
John Green wrote a fantastic essay exploring this. He compared general anxiety to the athletic yips.
Where a highly trained professional suddenly loses the ability to perform a basic skill they've practiced tens of thousands of times.
Sports psychology defines this fear of failure as a dispositional tendency.
Because the person's brain becomes overwhelmed by anticipating the aversive consequences of failing.
The public shame, the embarrassment, the fear literally interrupts the automated motor pathways in the brain.
Green's essay focuses heavily on Rick Ankiel, a Major League Baseball pitcher.
One of the most famous cases of the yips in history.
He was a phenomenal pitcher, but during the playoffs, he suddenly couldn't throw a strike. He kept throwing the ball wildly to the backstop.
His automated motor pathways completely crashed under the weight of anticipation.
But the beautiful part of his story is his resilience. He stepped away from pitching, went back to the minor leagues, and completely retrained himself as an outfielder.
And eventually made it back to the major leagues as a hitter. It is a profound testament to neuroplasticity.
It proves that even when the software crashes spectacularly, we have this incredible biological capacity to reboot the system and rewrite the code from scratch.
Which really brings us back to the core reality of our biology. Fear is complex.
It is deeply ingrained.
It is an invisible social contagion and a powerful societal lever. But it is not a life sentence.
Exactly. To summarize the journey we've taken today, fear isn't a flaw in your character.
It's an ancient survival mechanism.
It gives you goosebumps to make you look bigger, shuts down your digestion to help you run, and lets you literally smell danger in the air.
And it shapes the way cultures build their worldviews.
But you aren't defenseless against it. You have social buffering to calm your chemical receptors.
You have exposure therapy to safely rewire those neural pathways.
And you have critical thinking to recognize when your instincts are being manipulated by outside forces.
I want to leave you with one final thought regarding how we process the world. Psychologists study something called cognitive consistency theory.
Okay, what is that?
It suggests that fear is simply an inconsistency between what you expect to happen and what you actually perceive happening in real time.
So when reality violently diverges from your expectations,
The gap between those two things generates fear. So I pose this question to you. If fear is just a mismatch between expectation and reality, what happens to your fears if you learn to simply change your expectations?
wow, does the internal alarm finally stop ringing if you can just accept the new reality?
Something to think about.
It's a powerful framework to carry with you the next time you feel that sudden drop in your stomach or those piloerection goosebumps on your arms. Keep questioning the mechanics of your own mind. Keep exploring the world. And remember that sometimes the scariest ghost is just outdated software in your own head. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
I want you to try a little thought experiment with me. So imagine, just for a second, holding your breath for over 20 minutes.
Okay, that sounds pretty awful already.
Right. But wait, it gets worse. Because while your lungs are literally screaming for air, you are diving 500 meters down into pitch black, freezing ocean water.
No thanks, I'm out.
Yeah, but then you finally come up to the surface and there's just no relief at all because you are about to spend the next, 120 days standing on a sheet of solid ice, eating absolutely nothing, all while getting battered by minus 40-degree winds.
I mean, honestly, that sounds like some kind of intricate torture method from Greek mythology.
It really does, right. It sounds completely impossible for any living creature to survive.
Hmm.
But this isn't science fiction. And it isn't some weird extreme human endurance challenge. This is just the everyday reality for the emperor penguin.
It's wild to even think about.
It really is. So in this deep dive, we're unpacking a literal mountain of biological research on these guys, from their just incredible anatomical engineering to their highly precarious life cycle. We're looking at how they survive, why they behave the way they do, and, the really sobering April 2026 declaration that officially placed them on the endangered species list.
Yeah, and I think it's important to frame this right, because when you hear emperor penguin, it is so easy to just picture a cute, waddling bird sliding around on a glacier.
Totally. Like in the movies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we have to completely reframe how we view them, because emperor penguins are, well, they are highly specialized extremophiles. Like, their entire physical structure, their complex behavior, reproduction, every single aspect of their existence relies on this razor-thin, delicate balance with one of the most violently harsh environments on Earth.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand how they survive the Antarctic, we first have to look at what happens when they actually plunge into that freezing ocean. And these are not small, lightweight birds we're talking about.
Oh, not at all.
No, we are talking about the tallest and heaviest living penguin species on the entire planet. They stand an average of 115 centimeters tall, so getting really close to 4 feet. And they can weigh anywhere from 22 to 45 kilograms.
And, they really need that immense mass for what they do beneath the surface. You mentioned the 20-minute breath hold earlier.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
It is. But biologists routinely track them, diving to depths of up to 535 meters.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's actually a recorded dive of one individual reaching 564 meters, staying completely submerged for almost 22 minutes.
Wait, 564 meters. If a human tried this, our lungs would crush like a cheap soda can under that kind of pressure.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, you're dealing with pressure up to 40 times greater than at the surface. So instead of wearing like biological scuba gear, their bodies are essentially built like solid submarines.
That's actually a really great way to put it, because most birds possess hollow air-filled bones, right? Which is an evolutionary adaptation for flight. It keeps them light.
Right.
But emperor penguins have entirely solid bones. So by eliminating those internal air pockets, they completely remove the risk of mechanical barotrauma.
Which is getting crushed by the pressure.
Exactly. The immense deep-sea pressure simply has nothing to compress, so their skeletons just don't crush.
Okay, so that handles the pressure aspect. But what about the oxygen? Because if you hold your breath for 20 minutes, you black out and drown.
Yeah, they manage this through extreme internal regulation. When they dive, their heart rate drops drastically, going as low as just 15 to 20 beats per minute.
15 beats, that's barely beating at all.
Right, and they selectively shut down blood flow to non-essential organs, basically redirecting everything to just the brain and the heart. But the real secret is actually in their blood chemistry. They have this uniquely structured hemoglobin and myoglobin.
Wait, hemoglobin is what carries oxygen in our blood too, right? What makes theirs so different?
So their molecular structure is modified to bind to oxygen much more tenaciously. A human's hemoglobin releases oxygen steadily as we need it. But the emperor penguin's proteins are structured to basically hoard the oxygen and then selectively release it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this allows them to remain conscious and active even when the overall concentration of oxygen in their blood drops to levels that would cause a human being to instantly pass out.
But I guess my question is, why go through all this physiological extremity just to get a meal? Going down 500 meters seems like an incredible waste of energy.
Well, they need this specialized physiology to execute highly complex sub-ice foraging strategies. The food isn't just, swimming out in the open waiting for them.
Fair point.
So one strategy actually involves the penguin diving 50 meters deep and then looking back up toward the bottom surface of the sea ice. They spot fish swimming right against that frozen ceiling.
Ah, I see.
Then they swim rapidly upward to ambush them from below. And they will execute this upside-down hunting maneuver half a dozen times on a single breath before they even surface.
Hunting upside down beneath a frozen ceiling is just a terrifying image. But, looking at the biological data, it makes it clear that their true endurance test happens entirely out of the water, which is crazy.
It really is.
Because when most animals sensibly flee the Antarctic winter, the emperor penguin just turns around and marches straight into it.
Yeah. Around March or April, triggered by the days starting to get shorter, they actually leave the relative safety and warmth of the ocean.
It is already freezing.
Right, but warmer than the surface. And they trek anywhere from 50 to 120 kilometers over solid, shifting pack ice just to reach their breeding colonies.
And once they arrive, courtship begins in the pitch black of winter. We're talking about these ecstatic vocal displays, which basically involve a lot of very loud, very complex posturing and calling.
And contrary to popular cultural belief, they do not mate for life. They practice what biologists call serial monogamy.
Yeah, the fidelity rate between years is remarkably low. It's just 15%, which honestly, when you look at the timeline, makes total sense.
Yeah, they literally cannot afford to wait around for romance.
Exactly. If their partner from last year is late returning to the colony, they immediately pair up with someone else because the window for breeding is just incredibly tight.
The biological drive to reproduce before the season turns just supersedes any kind of long-term pairing. So once they pair up, the female lays a single, pale, greenish-white egg.
And that egg weighs about 460 to 470 grams. But here's the wild part about those numbers. That egg is only 2.3% of the mother's body weight.
Right.
It is literally one of the smallest egg-to-mother weight ratios of any bird in existence.
Because producing a massive egg would demand massive energy reserves.
Yeah.
And the female simply doesn't have those reserves to spare because she is about to walk 100 kilometers back to the ocean just to eat.
But before she can make that trek, they have to do the egg transfer. And this is the moment of absolute maximum peril.
Oh, for sure.
The mother has to carefully roll this egg from her feet over to the male's feet. If that egg slips and touches the freezing ice for more than 1 or 2 minutes, the chick inside dies instantly.
Yeah.
And if the egg dies, the couple doesn't try again. They immediately split up, abandon the breeding season entirely, and just walk back to the sea.
The margin for error is essentially zero.
Wait, hold on, though. I'm looking at this whole timeline. If the margin for error is absolute zero, why on earth do they choose to breed in the absolute dead of the Antarctic winter?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
I mean, you're dealing with the darkest, coldest months of the year. Doing this when the weather is at its most lethal seems like an evolutionary death wish.
Well, this is a classic example of an extreme evolutionary trade-off. It is all about timing the chick's development. Think of this winter breeding cycle like an incredibly slow-burning fuse. Breeding in the dead of winter ensures that the chick slowly grows and develops over those harsh months. When it finally fledges, meaning it grows its waterproof juvenile feathers, and actually needs to enter the ocean to feed itself, that specific moment aligns perfectly with the Antarctic summer in December and January.
Because that is when the oceans are richest in food.
Precisely. If the adults waited for the warm summer to start breeding, the chicks wouldn't be ready for the water until the following autumn.
Oh, right.
They would be forced to learn how to hunt right when the ocean's freezing over again and the food supply drops drastically. So they are enduring the winter so their children can survive the summer.
They are playing an incredibly painful long game. So once the female successfully transfers that egg to the father, she leaves. And the male is left completely alone with the egg, kicking off one of the most grueling survival tests in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, the male incubates that egg by balancing it carefully on the tops of his feet. He tucks it under a warm fold of skin called a brood patch, keeping it safe from the ice for 65 to 75 days.
And he does not eat a single thing during this entire period.
Nothing at all.
By the time that egg hatches, the male will have been fasting for a total of 120 days since he first arrived at the colony. He can lose up to 20 kilograms, which is half of his entire body weight.
It's staggering.
Just picture what that looks like. You start with this massive, robust animal, and after 4 months in the dark, you have an emaciated bird, feathers ruffled, dull-eyed, completely running on biological fumes, Just standing there.
Standing there in temperatures that routinely plummet to minus 40 degrees Celsius,
Ah.
while being battered by winds howling at 200 kilometers per hour.
To survive that kind of exposure, the males form this massive, tightly packed huddle, which is often referred to as a turtle formation. But it's not just a static group hug. It's an incredibly complex, highly coordinated, slow-motion stadium wave for survival.
Right, because everyone has to take a turn.
Exactly. The guys on the outer, upwind edge of the circle are taking the absolute brunt of the frozen storm. But slowly, the entire mass shuffles. The ones on the outside peel off and move to the sheltered leeward side of the group.
Everyone constantly rotates through the warm center and the freezing outer edge. Without this churning collective behavior, the birds on the outside would freeze to death and the birds in the middle would overheat.
Which is just brilliant.
It really is. But the true astonishment is what happens when the egg finally hatches. The chick emerges completely helpless. The scientific term is semi-altricial.
And the father has been starving for 4 months. He has lost half his body weight. He is literally dying of starvation, yet he somehow manages to feed this newborn chick.
Yeah, he feeds it crop milk, which is a highly nutritious secretion produced from an esophageal gland.
Calling it milk almost sounds too gentle. How is a starving bird producing anything?
Well, it is essentially the father's body liquidating its absolute last emergency physical reserves. The crop milk is 59% protein and 28% lipid. The father is sacrificing his final bodily resources to produce this thick, nutrient-dense paste. This biological trick is incredibly rare in the avian world, shared really only with pigeons and flamingos.
But he can only keep that up for a few days, right? The tank is completely empty. So right at the critical moment, around mid-July to early August, the females return.
Talk about perfect timing.
Seriously. But imagine this. You have thousands of females waddling back from the ocean into a chaotic colony of thousands of identical-looking males holding thousands of identical-looking chicks. How do they find their specific mate in all that noise and darkness?
They rely entirely on complex dual-frequency vocalizations. A penguin uses 2 separate vocal tracks simultaneously to produce a unique acoustic beat pattern.
That's wild, like singing 2 notes at once.
Basically, yeah. This creates a highly specific, penetrating acoustic signature that cuts straight through the howling wind and the noise of the colony. The female calls out, and the male responds, allowing her to pinpoint his exact location.
But, the harsh reality is that not every female returns.
No. The Antarctic environment is unforgiving. 10 to 20% of the females simply do not make it back. They fall victim to leopard seals, orcas, or sudden changes in the sea ice.
And when a mother doesn't return, a brutal tragedy unfolds in the colony.
Yeah.
Because the starving father can't keep feeding the chick on crop milk forever.
Exactly. He reaches a physiological breaking point where he is forced to abandon the chick in order to walk back to the ocean and save his own life. The environment just drives desperation.
Yeah.
And female penguins, who have lost their own chicks to the cold, or who never made it at all, will sometimes try to adopt or honestly violently steal an orphan chick.
Which, that seems almost sympathetic until you look at the mechanics.
Well, because it leads to massive, violent scuffles among the adults.
Yeah.
Often the chicks are crushed and trampled to death in the chaos.
Oh, that's horrible.
And even if a female successfully steals an orphan, it's a biological dead end. A single female cannot feed and protect a chick on her own while also foraging for food, so the chick inevitably gets abandoned again. It is a brutal illustration of how razor-thin the margin for survival truly is.
Which brings us to the most pressing issue right now. This entire intricate, perfectly timed, razor-thin survival strategy relies on one foundational element remaining constant, and that is stable, predictable sea ice. And right now, the floor is quite literally melting beneath their feet.
Yeah. In April 2026, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, officially declared the emperor penguin as endangered. And, looking at the scientific consensus impartially, the driving factor behind this status change is human-induced climate change. Specifically how global warming is causing the early breakup of sea ice.
Because satellite imagery tracking these colonies from 2009 to 2018 showed a 10% loss in the overall population. That is over 20,000 adult birds gone in less than a decade.
And the future projections are severe. Based on that satellite data, there is a 45% probability that the population will decline by more than 50% by the year 2073. Furthermore, modeling predicts quasi-extinction for 90% of colonies by the year 2100.
And for anyone listening who is unfamiliar with the terminology, Quasi-extinction basically means a population threshold where there might still be a few living individuals scattered around, but the numbers are so low that the species is functionally doomed.
Right. They lose the critical mass necessary to maintain genetic diversity or even, form those life-saving huddles we talked about.
But from a purely practical perspective, I have to ask, and I know a lot of people wonder this if the sea ice is melting, why can't a bird just move onto solid land or rocky shores to lay its egg? Like, why are they so strictly tied to the ice?
Well, it is a combination of geography and highly specialized anatomy. Their bodies are adapted to slide and traverse over flat, smooth ice. They physically struggle to navigate rough, rocky terrain. Yeah, and more importantly, their breeding colonies need to be within a very specific walking distance from open water foraging grounds. The solid land in Antarctica is often blocked by towering ice shelves, or is simply too far inland.
That makes sense.
If they move further inland to find solid ground, the 100-kilometer trek becomes a 300-kilometer trek, which is just physiologically impossible. They're biologically locked into the pack ice.
And the timing of the ice melting is the true killer here.
Let's go back to that slow-burning fuse.
Hmm.
The chicks need time to grow their waterproof juvenile plumage. It is a slow molting process that takes about 2 months.
Right.
If the sea ice breaks up early beneath their feet, before those chicks have their waterproof feathers, they are plunged directly into the freezing ocean. Without that waterproof protection, the downy chicks simply absorb the water, sink, and freeze to death.
Which is just awful. And the Halley Bay disaster is a really devastating example of this. So Halley Bay used to be the second largest emperor penguin colony in the world. But between 2015 and 2018, an incredibly strong El Niño event, combined with unusually high winds, resulted in record low sea ice.
It was unprecedented.
Yeah, the ice broke up months too early. The colony suffered almost total breeding failure, with thousands of chicks dying for 3 consecutive years.
And some adults did attempt to relocate to another colony 55 kilometers away. But the population increase at the new site was just a tiny fraction of what was lost at Halley Bay. It proves they cannot simply migrate out of the problem.
Right.
They're also highly sensitive to other human disturbances. Helicopter tourism, for example, causes intense stress. Observers note that chicks huddled in a creche, which is a defensive group formation, become noticeably apprehensive and stressed when a helicopter approaches, even within 1,000 meters.
Because their icy world is changing so rapidly and unpredictably, we are also seeing these incredibly specialized birds occasionally showing up in places they absolutely do not belong. We are seeing records of vagrant penguins wandering thousands of miles away from the Antarctic Circle.
Yeah, it strongly highlights the disruption of their environment and suggests severe navigational confusion caused by shifting ocean temperatures and currents.
I'm sure you probably remember the famous case of Happy Feet, the juvenile penguin that washed up on a beach in New Zealand back in 2011.
Oh, yeah.
He was completely out of his element. He was so overheated and confused that he ate 3 kilograms of wet sand, mistaking it for snow, just to cool his internal temperature down. He required multiple extensive surgeries to survive before researchers could finally release him back into the ocean.
It's so sad.
And just recently, in November 2024, a group of surfers in Denmark, Western Australia, were out in the water, and an emperor penguin simply waddled up onto the beach. It is the furthest north a vagrant emperor has ever been recorded.
And, even attempting to keep them in captivity to study them or help them is notoriously difficult, precisely because of those extreme biological adaptations. Early attempts in the 1930s and 40s to house them in zoos were almost entirely fatal.
Wow, really?
Yeah, until facilities like the Aalborg Zoo in Denmark engineered highly specialized, climate-controlled chill houses. They simply are not animals that can pivot and adapt to a different environment.
Which is such a contrast to how we see them. Culturally, we love to anthropomorphize them. We put them in blockbuster documentaries like March of the Penguins or animated movies like Happy Feet. We love the idea of them as these resilient, dancing, singing characters.
Yeah, we really do.
But in reality, they are serious, intensely powerful animals. There's a historical account in the sources where a crew of 6 grown men tried to capture a single 40-kilogram male penguin for an exhibition. This one bird repeatedly tossed all 6 men around the ice, knocking them over with its flippers until they had to collectively tackle it to the ground just to subdue it.
Because they are built like compact tanks of pure muscle. The contrast between our cultural image of the penguin and their biological reality is striking. Their reality is a masterclass in stoic, unforgiving evolutionary adaptation. They do not survive out there through sheer willpower or bravery.
Right.
They survive because of millions of years of highly specialized biological engineering.
And that brings us full circle. From holding their breath for 20 minutes at 500 meters deep in crushing pressure to enduring a 120-day fast in minus 40-degree winds. We have looked at the incredible extremes they push their bodies to and how precariously their entire existence balances on the edge of a melting sheet of sea ice.
It really redefines what endurance actually means on this planet.
It absolutely does. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one lingering thought to mull over. Something we found buried deep in the taxonomy notes.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah, fossil records show that an ancient ancestor of the emperor, a species called Ridgeon's penguin, lived in New Zealand around 3 million years ago. That was during the late Pliocene epoch, a geological time when the Earth was significantly warmer than it is today.
Right.
Which begs a fascinating question for you to ponder. If their ancient ancestors thrived in a warmer world 3 million years ago, could the emperor penguin theoretically evolve to survive a warmer climate again, given enough millions of years? Or is the current speed of our changing world simply far too fast for the ultimate ice specialist to adapt? It makes you wonder, the next time you picture that pitch black, freezing water and holding your breath, are we witnessing the final incredible deep dive of the emperor?